it's always good to come out and hear from candidates so that when you go to the ballot box, you do know who your candidates are, you know what your issues are, so you can make an educated guess. So for all of you coming out here on a Sunday afternoon, kudos to you, and my thank you to you for coming out here. Also want to thank some of the other politicians in the room who are running for office and point them out. House District 23 candidate Sharon Freeman, please stand right there. 25? 23. There's a lot of people running in 23. Sharon just got moved over. Laura Moret, running for House District 20. Also, Polk County Sheriff Mark Garton, running for re-election. He is also here on my request as a bouncer in case any of you crazies get out of hand. He is my muscle. I'm kidding. This guy just gave me a look like, we're going to get thrown out. Did I miss anybody that's running for public office right now? Ross, you're running for something right now? Yeah. Ross Schwarzenegger, what are you running for?
State Senate District 12.
State Senate, stand up please. State Senate District 12. Also want to thank our sponsors who helped make this happen. L&L Equipment, Dallas Upholstery, 5153 Tactical, State Farm Mitch Ratzliff, and Craig and Carol Morgan from Salem Paint, sitting right over there. Wave, guys. Thank you so much. These are the companies here in our area, local companies that are helping make things like this happen. And we appreciate you guys. All right, we're starting with Mr. Neerman. Next set of questions. This first one. I promise I did not write this one. I promise. You're going to think it was me, it was not. Jackson County marijuana growers are appealing to the OLCC to allow them to treat marijuana farms like winery tasting rooms. Now, wineries right now are on EFU land and can be right next to schools. Keep that in mind with the answer to this question. Do you support or oppose this modification?
So I think I didn't vote for Measure 91. That was back in 2014. That was the one that made marijuana legal for recreational in the state of Oregon. So I didn't vote for that. I'm not a fan of recreational marijuana. I try to uphold the law, so it is the law of the land, and so I'm happy to do that, but I'm not a big fan of that. And I think we need to move slowly on this, and I think that sounds like a little bit more quickly than I would like to move.
Mike and I don't agree on a lot, but I think we're pretty close on this one. I'm a huge defender of the initiative process, and marijuana was brought to us on an initiative petition. I have lots of questions about where we're going to end up with it down the road, but I think we have to move very, very cautiously. I think putting in tasting rooms, might be a good idea for some people, but I'm not sure it's a good idea for the community. And I just want to have a whole lot more discussion on an issue like that before I'm interested.
A good follow-up question to this is obviously, as I think Mr. Newman kind of hinted at, on the federal level it's still illegal. Here in Oregon it's legal. Kind of a broad question with this as a follow-up. How do you feel the legislature has to move forward with issues like this and other issues when it comes to marijuana, now that it is legal in the state but it's not legal federally?
I don't think the legislature has to move forward on an issue like this, even though the sale of marijuana is legal by initiative petition, and I think the state has done about everything they can to accommodate that particular vote. I don't think we're duty-bound to chocolate-coated or anything else. Enough is enough, and any of these things that take legislation, the legislature can just say no. You kill the bill in committee or whatever you have to do, you don't have to vote on it. But if this stuff were to come to regulation, the legislature can still say, whoa, back it up. That's a regulatory issue we want to deal with at the legislative level and take control of it. The legislature usually does not pull up and change regulations, but they have the right to do that. And I think this is one that we'd be well advised to proceed in.
Bigger picture-wise, we're starting to get into a little bit of a problem here in the United States of America. When I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the State of Oregon and the United States Constitution, it seems like we have kind of this thing of like, well, it's not legal federally, so we can just do whatever we want. We're the states or whatever. And I don't know if you know this, but Oregon has a sanctuary law in the state that says that no law enforcement official in the state of Oregon, from the state police on down to Sheriff Garden, none of these law enforcement officials can enforce any kind of immigration law. If your only crime is to be in the country illegally, they can't do anything. So we have a law that says that law enforcement can't enforce the law. I'm chief petitioner on a ballot measure to repeal that law. And then we have guys over in a bird sanctuary in Mount Hero County. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with the marijuana thing? So we kind of need to take a deep breath, and we need to say, we need to have a little bit more respect for rule of law from top to bottom on these things. So, I don't know, I'm not really a fan of this kind of breaking with law like that.
All right,
No,
question.
one thing to-
Yes, rebuttal, sir.
Yeah. No, it's not a rebuttal, it's just an extension. One of the areas that is concerning me more and more is when we have federal laws that we're all bound to. And I agree with Mike. I swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the federal and state and the laws pertaining thereto. But we go and do something as a state, and then we just blow off the federal government. What do they do? Nothing. And they've got the hammer. There's always a threat if we do something, the federal government's going to cut off funding. No, they're not. They don't cut off funding at all. They could, but they don't. And as long as we have an ineffectual federal government system, then we may as well do whatever we want at the local level, because we're not a nation of laws any longer. We're a nation of simply a showdown between states and federal, and we know the federal will help. So we have to fix that problem too.
All right, changing subjects. Where do you stand on the issue of Oregon school districts opening up their restrooms and locker rooms to opposite sexes?
So, yeah, I've been working with a group that's kind of working against the Dallas School District on this one. And just so, in case you don't know, there's been a girl at the Dallas School District that is a transgender person that's insisted on using the men's locker facilities there. They opened up a separate facility for, like a one bathroom for or whatever, and that wasn't acceptable. So I think that we're accommodating people, and I'm fine with that. We need to accommodate people, especially people who are having a tough time fitting in or whatever. So we need to accommodate those people. But when it comes down to, in order for me to feel okay about myself, I need to be with you naked. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. I get to invade your privacy because that's what I need to feel okay about myself. And so we have kind of a huge problem with that. And so I'm ready to draw the line, and I'm ready to say no, and enough is enough. And our kids, all of our kids from top to bottom, have a tough enough time, especially in those years, they're that junior high school time. And we don't need to make it tougher for them. So let's just everybody just go to their own bathroom and call it good.
Gender dysphoria, what we're talking about, is a treatable but not curable, medically defined disease. And what we need to do is calm down a little, sit down with the people involved, and that's the school district, the parents of minors, and the minor children, and say, what the heck is going on here, and what do we need to resolve this problem? I'm not sure that the amount of noise we're making about this problem is reflecting the size of the problem. In fact, my understanding is the young lady we're talking about actually moved out of the district. So it's not a problem for Dallas anymore, but it hasn't slowed down. The other side is the federal government has stepped into this thing and started putting down rules. There's the big issue. We don't need the federal government to help us decide what we're going to do in terms of rebuilding school buildings and all this sort of thing. What's the size of the problem? And what have we been doing in the past? And who's been hurt? And I agree we can't go around just wildly discriminating against different types of people. But at the same time, we can't accommodate absolutely everybody either. Or can't accommodate the way they want to be accommodated. So we have to come up with another approach to this. And I wish the federal regulators would butt out, frankly.
So I want to follow up with that. What would be your suggestion on how to fix this? You've both kind of indicated we need to have conversation, which is good. not necessarily having a specific answer. So I want to kind of pin a question of, what would you say would be the answer to dealing with this?
Under the worst-case scenario, the federal government continues to push enforcement and threatens to take away education money, which I already said probably isn't going to happen, they never have done it. But they could file lawsuits, and there will be lawsuits filed. In the Dallas case, there's a lawsuit ready on either side. It didn't matter what the Dallas School Board did, they were going to get sued. And that's the way we do things. But we were in Israel. I noticed they've changed their restroom system there so that they have closed stalls now. There's a hand washing area and a long row of closed stalls, lockable from the inside. Nobody knows who's in there, I guess, until they come out, whatnot. And ultimately, if they push the hammer all the way, we may be faced into talking about those kinds of reconstructions. That does not address the issue of shower rooms, but I think if you actually ask around, you find that relatively few kids are taking showers after PE now anyway. It's just not part of what's going on, so there may be ways of changing that. But we could get pushed into a situation where we legally have to do some reconstruction. I hope not, because that's not the solution to the problem for the number of students that we have involved. It's in the hands of the federal government right now what they're going to put the hammer on.
My goodness, how did we ever get from the Peloponnesian era to 2016 with separate with the facilities that we have right now? And you say, oh, so let's have separate stalls and all kind of stuff, and there's a whole new set of problems that comes with that. So why don't we just go to the way that we got here to 2016, and everybody just look down and see what they are, and lift up your tail or whatever, and check what you are, and go to the proper facility for you. And if somebody really has a problem somewhere or something like that, we can have a one-off or something like that. But for gosh sakes, you talk about the size of the problem, and we don't need to just spend a bunch of money to build individual stalls and all kind of stuff. Schools have bigger fish to fry than this, so we don't need individual stalls or anything like that. Let's do it the way that we did, that we got to this place in history, and it worked.
Mr. Thompson?
I'd just like to comment on that, and it's not in disagreeing with his positions. But remember, we just said we're a nation of laws. We are sworn to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States and the state of Oregon. If this thing goes to a court decision, that becomes the effect of law. When I said worst case scenario, I meant that. If the federal government sues on this issue, if they win that lawsuit, then I'm not in a position where I want to say, well, I'm going to just disregard the courts because I don't like the court decision. I feel that's the downfall of the nation to do that. I hope we don't get that far. I don't want to rebuild the world and all that. But I said worst case scenario because if these lawsuits are decided against the schools, we will be put in a position of doing some rebuilding or defying the federal law. And I don't want to be in that position.
All right, every politician talks about economic development, especially during their campaigns, pretty much tickling everyone's ear. You hear it, I'm doing it for the middle class, I'm doing it for the middle class. But what specifically is your plan or plans to deal with the needs in House District 23? In other words, how can Oregon attract new employers with family wage jobs?
So that's a good question. I'm on the House, it's the Transportation and Economic Development Committee. So I hear a lot of economic development stuff. And I almost think that, I see this economic development money. We have dedicated economic development money that comes out of lottery. And I see this stuff just get wasted on all kinds of dumb stuff. Just really dumb stuff. And I wish we could just quit doing that. I wish we could take that money and give it to, 1.5% to the veterans or something like that. But anyway, I think that the best thing you can do for economic development would be to take that money and just return it to the taxpayers. They would do economic development. And even, in our neck of the woods, in the Willamette Valley here, we have a bunch of agriculture, And when I talk to farmers who are our small business people in our neck of the woods, they're not clamoring for a whole bunch of government programs or government dollars. They just want to be left alone to thrive. And I think that's the best thing that we can do for economic development. We have some things that are the proper role of government, which are some transportation things, we already talked about that. But for the most part, we just need to just strip away the regulations and let our economy thrive here.
One of the problems we have here in District 23 is it's an extremely large, somewhat diverse district. We start up in Dayton, for those of you that are local, and it goes down to the Lane County line. So there are lots of different community and economic structures involved in that, and we have to take those into account. Most of the economic development is going to revolve around communities with one exception, and that's the growing wine industry. And that's our big, big success right now that we need to do whatever we can do to foster, because that is the immediate future. We will become the Napa-Sonoma situation up here in Oregon, because Napa-Sonoma is moving north. They're buying land here by the thousands of acres, putting in vineyards. And what we don't have is the key to our economic development. We need to have better tourist facilities, we need to have housing facilities, motels, hotels, and things to make the wine country an experience. That's the short term. The longer term, we have to get our transportation system straightened out so we can start attracting business and industry in here. The example I would use was, many of you will remember when they built 205. It was open, the sign of the freeway said open to such and such a point, and they kept building it until pretty soon it crossed the Glen Jackson Bridge. By the time it was completed, it had filled in along the edges with commerce. We need to be talking about the same kind of thing here. Business doesn't come here because we've got a lot of green. They come here because it makes sense for their business model. We need to either widen 99 and increase the transportation capacity on that, which, by the way, that was the original plan. We own most of it right away. Or we need to start talking about a West Side Freeway. We're one of the only states in the country that has a single freeway running north and south with no options. If we could get a transportation system and a freeway started down the west side of the valley in the foothill, feeding back into the valley, you would see that fill in with business faster than we got the thing completed.
A follow-up on this with the family wage part of the question. The recent three-tier minimum wage that just got passed, how do you feel about that? Plus, a positive and negative, pro or con, is it going to help us or is that going to hurt us?
It's going to initially be a problem. My biggest concern about it is we don't have a training wage in there, and we need to have a way to hire high school kids and train them to work. A lot of the jobs that high school kids and young adults will go into, they don't have any background, they don't have any experience, they don't have any working history, and employers are going to be reluctant to hire them at the higher minimum wage. So I wish we had done that, and I don't know what the legislature might do about it in the future. The rest of it is an adjustment. We will survive this minimum wage increase the same way we survived every other minimum wage increase. Business will adjust. It will cost us jobs. The biggest growth industry right now in Oregon is automation. Every company that sells robotics or automation equipment is here, going door to door, showing people how to do it. We were in a McDonald's in Salt Lake City a month ago, and there were 4 large modules, 2-sided modules for customer order entry. And essentially it was what you have at the cash register, only it's all on a floor-to-ceiling screen in front of you. You pick what you want on it, you get all done, you hit go, put your credit card or cash in the machine, and your name goes up on the wall as order pending for whatever name you put in for yourself. When it comes to the counter, it's up there as order delivered. There was one person working a 30-foot counter in that particular McDonald's. So I think we're going to see some of that happen, and I worry in terms of those are jobs typically going to youth as starter jobs. But if this is what we've done, we will live with it. I have questions about the way it was done.
I voted no on that minimum wage bill, and despite my no vote, the other people in the legislature passed it, the governor signed it. And you know, I stand for freedom. And I stand for the freedom of an employer and an employee to get together and to come to terms on what works best for the both of them. And I'm appalled at the hubris of government that thinks that they can improve lives for people just by dictating a higher wage. We'll see how that works. We'll see how if I'm making $9.50 an hour right now, and the government dictates my wage goes up to $15. That's great if my employer keeps me. If my wage goes down to zero, that's not so great. And so we need to think long and hard about what we're doing. When Jim talks about like, oh, well, the businesses will absorb it. No, they can maybe absorb, a 25-cent increase here and there, all those kinds of things. This is a huge increase. It's a huge increase, and I don't think that businesses are going to be able to absorb it. And so this is just another hit on the economic prosperity in Oregon, and we're all going to pay the price on that.
Mr. Thompson?
If I said absorb it, I didn't mean it that way. Business will accommodate it because they have to. But that's not going to be good, and it's going to cost us jobs. The other issue, of course, is compression. If you raise wages to $15 an hour minimum, then the guy making $16 an hour is going to want a $3 wage increase. That's where it kicks in, because those are the jobs that we won't lose. We'll automate them, which is a loss, but the work will still be done, but we can afford to automate those jobs, and those are our family wage type situations that are going out the door. So this thing, it goes all the way up. Probably you have to get up around 30,000 or so a year before you're going to find where it will neutralize itself.
All right, before I get to the next question, it was brought to my attention that earlier I forgot to recognize Dallas Mayor Brian Dalton, who's sitting right in front of my face. He's also running for re-election. I apologize. Our next question is about health care. Everyone, I think, would agree that the goal of making health care affordable and accessible is a good goal. But there's been problems on a federal level as well as here in Oregon. Everyone knows about the debacle, the expensive debacle, the disaster that's been happening here in Oregon. How do you propose the legislature move forward regarding health care in Oregon?
Well, one thing we need to do is, you talk about the debacle. That was $30 million. It wasn't just a debacle, it was all caps debacle. And we need to make sure that when we spend money on health care, that it goes to health care, that it doesn't go to a website that never shows up. But there's a lot of things that we can do for health care. Most of them are on the federal level or something. But there's things we can do in Oregon. Like for instance, one thing we need to do in Oregon is we don't have tort reform here. We need to do tort reform so we make sure that healthcare dollars go to the healthcare process, not to the trial lawyers. When I go to the doctor, the only thing I care about is say, am I going to get better? And I'm kind of wimpy. I say, is it going to hurt? And then all my doctor cares about is Nirman going to get better, and am I going to get sued? And nobody ever asked what the cost of the health care was going to be or whatever. And when you hear things, you hear spiraling out of control. Do you ever hear that? You only hear that about two things. You hear that about health care and higher education. How about that, huh? How about that? You don't hear about, the price of automobiles is spiraling out of control, or the price of toasters is spiraling out of control. You don't hear that, because we've got too much government involvement in health care. We don't need to do that. For instance, let me give you an example. The Department of Consumer and Business Services took over the Cover Oregon project, whatever, that whole the healthcare marketplace kind of thing. And so if you go to their website and you buy a health care plan there, you get charged an extra $7 when you buy that. That extra $7, do you know what that's for? That's for the state of Oregon to operate a marketplace. You know what? When God made the universe, He made it so that marketplace appears spontaneously, free. You don't need to pay $7 to create a marketplace. Let's get the government out of this whole thing, and let's just let the private sector rule on this.
My staff stay right on tort reform, but as long as I was in the legislature, we had bills on tort reform, and they don't go anywhere. We need a different majority in order to make that happen. We need to do it, but I'm not hopeful it's going to happen. anytime soon. The problem we had with healthcare, it's a perfect collision of a bunch of worlds. We started the Oregon Health Plan in 1990 here, and it was built up as a sort of uniquely Oregon Medicaid-type delivery system that, had its problems with government medicine, but it worked pretty well. And then we got the affordable health care put down on us from the federal government, the so-called Obamacare. Well, that was put in with a caveat that we could accept it the way it was, or we could appeal to do something different. Well, the governor, who had the long history in healthcare at the time, thought that it would be better if we completed what we had started in the Oregon healthcare program and developed it out. So that became the Cover Oregon situation that was designed. The problem with that was that they built too much into it. I voted for the original study. I was on the committee that looked at that, but I became disenchanted about halfway through because the committee working on the plan wanted to have perfect health care. Well, you're not going to get it in any kind of a system like this. We need to be talking about primary health care, not all-encompassing health care. And that's what brought it down, on top of the fact of absolute and sheer incompetence in setting up the Cover Oregon website. And there were lots of people involved in that at many different levels, so there's no one scapegoat. But everything went wrong that could possibly go wrong, and it was a debacle. Now we have to fix it. And the good side is we have community care organizations, some of which are working. So we have some things that are working, but we need to do more.
My answer is everyone should just stop getting sick. I know that's not practical. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? Emergency clauses this last couple sessions seem to have been out of control. They were attached to, it seemed like almost every bill. The emergency clause is thrown on there, and the short version of what it is it's basically keeping us, the people, out of questioning what the legislation does when they pass a bill. The emergency clause on there does not allow us to say, we, the people, disagree, we want to send it to the ballot, we want to question what you have done. When they put an emergency clause on there, it eliminates us, we the people, from having that. So if they pass it in the Marble House, we're done. With all that set up, gentlemen, where do you stand on the emergency clause, and how do we, I don't mean to use the word again, but how do we fix this moving forward?
I'm absolutely opposed to the emergency clause. I have fought that on my own bill. If you go down to talk to the legislative council and you submit a bill, you get it back and there's an emergency clause on the bottom of it. When you go down to challenge them, the answer is, but that's the way we put the bills together. It's no big deal. Well, if I'm putting in an agricultural bill that has it's not an emergency, it's a long-term fix or something, I don't need an emergency on it. I don't care if it happens in 90 days or next year. We're going to get to the same point. But it has become an automatic response, and it's not new. This has been going on for 10 years. It may have gotten slightly worse, but years ago, we fought this same thing. And the way to fix it is to drop that into a system where you have to validate an emergency clause. Why is it an emergency? And the majority in the legislature has not been willing to do that. We tried the year that we had a 50-50 split in the House, but we thought we might have a chance that year, and no, it didn't work then either. So it's something that the legislature has been unwilling to do, or not a high enough priority that they get it done during the time interval. But it's crazy. There's no reason for it.
So this isn't really a job for the legislature to do, other than the fact that we need to act like adults and not put emergency clauses on all our bills. And I do that too. I go down to the legislative council and I tell them, oh, that bill looks good. You just need to take the emergency clause off of it, and they're like, oh no, I think you need to have it on there. I said, no, I think you need to take it off. I think you need to remember you work for me. And anyway, so I make them take it off there. But this is a problem for you. You folks own this problem ultimately because there's two legislative bodies in the state of Oregon. One of them is the state legislature, and the other one is the people of the state of Oregon. And the people of the state of Oregon control the Constitution, and this is written into the Constitution. So you need to have a ballot measure that's going to fix the Constitution. There was one that almost made it in this last session. some people, some observers thought that the Secretary of State maybe was a little bit too hard on the signature verification process, and so maybe we need a new Secretary of State. A little plug for Dennis Richardson there. We have, I believe that ballot measure has been resurrected for this cycle here. So if you see that one, you want to make sure that you sign it. And I was one that was circulating the other one, because I am, deep at my heart, I'm an activist. So I circulate ballot measures. Anyway, so that one's up to you to fix, and then me to the extent that I'm a citizen. So yeah, we need to fix that.
All right, we are winding down. We wanted to end on a good early note tonight. 7:30 was a good target for us. Thank you. Before they do their closing statements, please, thank you to our candidates for taking the time tonight. All right, each candidate is going to have 2 minutes for closing remarks, and then I'm going to personally rebuttal both of them.
I can't wait to get worked over by Gator. Anyway, so I'm glad to be your state representative, and so I'm just finishing up my first term there, and I think I've done a lot. I think I've learned a lot, and I think that I'm the kind of guy that's needed in that building there. And we hear a lot about, like, can we reach across the aisle and can we get along and all that kind of stuff. And you know what I think we really need is I think we need some people that can stand up there and say no. And boldly, just in the face of all the currents going in the other direction, say no, we're not going to do a transportation package. Yes, we need transportation infrastructure fixed and built and all that kind of stuff, but no, we're not going to do a transportation package, not unless you do this. And no, you don't get more money for education, even though we need to fix education. But no, you don't get it unless you fix this. And if somebody's not going to be bold enough and brave enough to stand there and say no, then everybody's just going to go along to get along, and you're going to get the same government that you've been getting for the last 30 years. So that's me, and if you want more of that, this is who you vote for state representative and House.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I'm sure you could have thought of something else to do if you weren't here, so I really appreciate you taking the time. The way I view the legislature, I told you earlier, is the People's Board of Directors. You get to elect a senator and a representative to be your members of that board. And the Board of Directors comes together every couple of years, every year now, to do the business of state. You're not getting a very good deal. I'd ask for your money back if I were you, because the legislature is not functional in the way that it's running. It's okay to stand up and say no. I think we all do that. But there's also a need for cooperation. I am one vote out of 90. 91, if you count the governor. He's got the big vote, or she. But the problem we have is that we have to form consensus to get things done, or we don't get things done. My preference would be to seat the legislature around a giant round table and then lock the door. Tell them, put your thinking caps on, figure out how to do this, stop the nonsense, you don't get lunch until you do it. It's just crazy how much time is wasted in political shenanigans that it doesn't change anything. The system is broken to the point that we don't even have floor debates anymore. A bill doesn't come to the floor unless there's a 99% chance it's going to pass. And go back and review the data. I mean, a bill very, very seldom fails on the floor. The caucuses line up. If one caucus has 3 speakers on this bill, the other caucus gets to have 3 speakers on this bill, then we vote. I mean, the system has to get back to getting the business done and stop the showmanship. And I think it's high time that we start planting that seed. I look forward to how this comes out. I would be very pleased to be your representative, but you have the right to vote. That's why we have the system we have. Thank you.
All right, thank you again.